So let's talk a little bit more about the benefits of a remote trial. And to introduce that, let me ask you to tell us a little more about your recent remote trial.
Sure. So just a few weeks ago, we finished a 6-day remote bench trial via Microsoft Teams in the Nassau County Commercial Division Court. And this was a very contentious matter. It was a company between 3 partners that had split up. Our client alleged that his partners had stolen the business from him. And this was a business that had worked 25 or 30 years to create together. And so this was a very important matter to our client. It was what was going to happen about the fact that the business he had spent his life creating had been stolen from him.
And did you know all along that the trial would be remote, or was there argument or motion practice on that?
So we were brought into the case fairly late in the game when the trial date had already been set. We were brought in to handle the trial. And from the time we came into the case, our understanding was that it would be a remote trial, but it wasn't until about 2 months before the trial was set to begin when we had a pre-trial conference and the judge confirmed that this was going to be done remotely via Microsoft Teams. And the judge gave us a few options regarding how the trial would proceed, including whether we would present testimony by direct affidavit or have live in-person testimony, live being remotely on video, but he made clear that it was going to be remote on Microsoft Teams and that there was no choice for the parties.
Did the judge say one way or another if he preferred remote trials to in-person?
The judge clearly indicated that that was his preference, and he thought that this was how all bench trials, frankly, should happen moving forward. And he gave a few reasons. I think really it's a matter of efficiency, both for the court and for the attorneys. For the court, judges often during a trial need to handle a short conference or matter that might come up, an emergency application. And so if it's a remote trial, instead of knowing the parties are sitting around the courtroom waiting, they're in their conference rooms or they're at home, and the judge can handle whatever he needs to.
What about your client? How did he react to the fact that it was going to be a remote trial?
I think initially our client was concerned, frankly. This, as I said, was a very important matter to him. This was a business he had spent his career building up. When he envisioned how it would go, how the trial would look when they were determining essentially the fate of this company that he had built, he thought he would be in a courtroom with a judge in a robe and his attorneys standing up and cross-examining witnesses like you would see on Law and Order. And when he learned that wasn't going to be the case, I think he felt like there was the possibility that it might not be treated as seriously as it was to him.
How did the client feel at the end of the day once he participated in the remote trial?
I would say very quickly it was a complete 180. I think at the end of the first day, the client looked to me and my partner and said, this is fantastic. All trials should be done this way. I think from a client's perspective, they're nervous about going to trial. It's not something they do every day the way it might be for some attorneys. And so I think, not having to worry about traffic getting to the courthouse, not having to worry about going through airport-style security when you get to the courthouse, which often can have long lines. And I can count on both hands how many times I've seen clients rushing to the courtroom, maybe even late for an appearance because they got stuck in a long security line.
For the lawyers, I know that in a trial, lawyers, we always feel like we don't have enough time. And so what was your observations as to whether it was better, for you and for the lawyers?
I think from a lawyer's perspective, putting to one side whether it's the right call for a specific case because of the type of case, from the lawyer's perspective, I think it's invaluable to be doing the trial from your conference room or your office or even your home. And then when the trial ends at the end of the day, you're in whatever place you want to be to start preparing for the next day. Otherwise, a lot of times I can recall doing trials pre-COVID where you're at the courthouse and it's 5 o'clock or 5:15 or 5:30. If you have a conference with the judge after, then you have to get back home, and then it's 6:30, 7 p.m. and you have to start preparing for trial the next day. And for us, that, as we know, it might mean not very much sleep. And so I think the remote trial has that benefit for attorneys.
In addition to kind of these logistical benefits, do you think there are real strategic advantages to remote trials?
I do. I think there's one real example that I can think of, which is that on a remote trial, anyone can appear as a witness. Obviously that's technically true in an in-person trial. If you can convince someone, they can appear as a witness. But in most in-person trials, I think in the state or federal courts, you can't compel a witness who isn't a party to attend the trial unless they're within the state or within a certain distance from the courthouse. And so that might limit your ability to get even a friendly witness who might want to help your client's case but isn't willing to come to New York. Whereas if you can tell them all they need to do is sit at their desk and turn on Zoom for 45 minutes or an hour and appear at the trial, that might be a witness who you couldn't otherwise get, who's now appeared for your client, and maybe that witness is the difference maker for your client's case.